All right, now can people hear me? Oh, yeah, you can hear me, right? People out there can hear me. I get this going? All right, sweet. This could fail big time. So this is going to be a large experiment. If it fails, I apologize. This is my first time doing something like this. It is being recorded, so if it freezes or whatever, sucks. So I'm gonna keep Safety Day pretty short this year, just because we're online. We got a lot of unknowns here. We have a few presenters that will be presenting here. And yeah, so before we begin, we have an award to give out. And this award is from the USPA. And it is the Chesley H. Judy Safety Award. And the tagline is, in recognition for having, through example, deed, training, or innovation, promoted safety in the sport of skydiving. And it's presented on Safety Day, and this year it goes to Ricardo. Woo! Golf clap for Ricardo. All right, this is what the certificate looks like. Oh yeah, nice. So maybe Ricardo's on here, maybe he's not, but he gets an award. Ricardo's here? Great. Ricardo got an award. He says, what? Nice. You got this award, Ricardo. I don't think it goes on the USPA card because it's not that cool, but you got this award. Hopefully it doesn't have coronavirus when I give it to you.
Everyone cough on it.
What?
What did I do?
What did you do? All right, for Ricardo again, because apparently he was muted, he gets an award for safety, for promoting safety in skydiving. So that's you, buddy. We also have a box of 50 t-shirts here to give out. Sorry, guys, that's all going to go to me. So yeah, we are going to get started. I have a PowerPoint presentation, and we'll go from there. Dave, do you want to lower this camera or angle it? All right. Down and to the right, towards me. Yeah, that's fine. All right. So we're going to start off with a quick video to get things going. You might recognize this from previous. All right, so what did we see in this clip here? How do I get out this video? Oh, difficulties. So the whole point of Safety Day this year that I was trying to convey is really just to get you thinking about things. With this video especially, you can start to think about like, oh, like I never really considered that situation to happen before. I'm kind of going to present situations where you might be like, oh, that's interesting. Like hadn't really considered that, to give you some food for thought. This is not going to be a comprehensive explanation on anything. If you want sort of more information about what we're talking about, please seek out me or someone experienced, someone that you trust, and we can get more information out there. But it's not going to be a comprehensive explanation of what's going on. I want to give you a few reminders of policies or rules that people often forget. And then finally, to really just take ownership of your own life. So far too often people say, I didn't know that my reserve has a certain number of pack jobs, or I didn't know I can jump with an expired AED, or I didn't know that a host of things. So I really want to provide you with resources so that you can do your own research and make sure you're taking a look at being responsible for yourself. So talking about this video, do you have a hook knife on your rig? A lot of people don't have hook knives because a lot of people think what do I need a hook knife for? And this is one example where you might need a hook knife because for whatever reason the 3-ring jammed and that canopy was not going to come off. So have you ever imagined a scenario where you might need a hook knife? And I've never used a hook knife, but I carry one for those moments where you just can't really predict. So that without that hook knife in that video, could be a different story. So we're going to cover a variety of topics: the fatality summary, injury procedures on the drop zone, aircraft safety, USPA changes, canopy reminders, canopy choices, camera safety, and emergency procedures. And then we'll have separate discussions with Dave, Chris, and Dimes here about exit separation, canopy skills, and gear considerations. So if throughout this presentation, if you have any questions, feel free to type in the chat down here. If you want to heckle me, you can type in the chat as well. I probably won't see it. We are probably pretty close to being live. I think at best are about 3 seconds from me talking to when you actually see it. It might be a little bit more delayed than that. So I should see your questions pretty quickly, but if you have questions, type them in and I'll be happy to go back and answer the questions. So to start, we're going to have Jim Reese call in here. This could be a bit of an experiment at the moment, but I'll see if this works with Mr. Jim Reese. Jim, if you want to unmute your microphone, people can see you right now.
People can see you right now.
Okay. I'm going to mute my computer so I can't hear myself. Okay. I can't hear you now because I muted my computer so we don't get any feedback. Text me or something if I need to do something about that. Well, thank you so much, Doug and CPI, for creating this alternative format for Safety Day. I'd like to thank both of CPI's S&TAs for their work to keep 2019 a safe year. That's Mike Hennessy and Doug Hendricks. And thank you all attendees for tuning in to make this sport safer for everybody in our region and yourselves. Are we doing so far so good? Okay, nobody's said anything. Just going to review a few short things. We don't really have time for a long seminar for me. I'm just going to go over a few short messages. Last year we had 15 fatalities in the sport of skydiving. 7 of those involved fully open parachutes with failure to land safely. 3 involved hard openings that resulted in disorientation, disabling, or delayed emergency procedures due to unconsciousness. And 4 were basically in the group of incorrect emergency procedures or low cutaway, low reserve deployment. That last category we've been talking a lot about lately. Get your chop done sooner, higher up. We're making progress in there. 4 fatalities isn't too bad. Still, it's 4 too many. The 7 has me concerned. We didn't have quite as many landing-related incidents last year. And many of these, some of these were intentional low turns by people trying to learn canopy piloting and not getting a coach. But the others mostly are due to late reaction, low panic turns, close to the ground. And while it's easy to look at these specific situations low to the ground and say what you would have done differently, The easier solution is to think about what we could have done higher up, 30 seconds before, 60 seconds before. This year we've had one fatality already, and that was at Sebastian with a giant landing area. And it was a panic turn low to the ground to avoid a collision. It seems pretty simple that all that would have taken to prevent that is decisions higher up to spread out vertical separation. That being said, I don't know any more details about that specific incident. We lost 11 people in Hawaii due to an airplane crash, not skydiving incident, but certainly skydiving related. And if you want to learn more about those issues, that would be a more complex discussion about how airplanes work. Maybe the best thing for you to do is take flying lessons or try to become a jump pilot. I like my pilots to be boring. Boring, straight out, gradual climb, takeoffs are your friend. Moving on a little bit. So 15 fatalities, it's a little bit higher than the previous year. It's still a pretty good year overall. We have a long-term trend of going down. And I would certainly love to see a 0 year someday. That would be really amazing for our sport. Ron Bell, the current director of safety and training, he's a really, really smart guy. I've known him for a few years now. And he's studying our statistics aggressively. This is his full-time job. But he needs more data. More data, more information can be used to create better solutions in training and recommendations to minimize our risks. The voluntary, anonymous, non-fatal incident report system that we have set up. Those incident reports in 2019 went up by about an order of magnitude, and we needed to go up by another order of magnitude if we're going to get useful information out of it. We have a long way to go there. The point of that system is it does not exist as a means to punish or investigate or strip ratings from any USPM members. It exists to encourage people to provide information that can be used to save lives. Nobody knows where the reports come from. I don't know. No BOD member knows. Director Bell, he does not even know. I visited headquarters last summer and observed their process. They have one staffer responsible for the DI identification process, where they go through these reports and say strip anything that make it easy to tie the report to a particular drop zone or particular individuals. So even the director of safety and training doesn't even see the before and after. The original data is discarded. I know big goofs are embarrassing. Those of us been in the sport a long time, we can count up embarrassing situations where fortunately nobody got hurt. We had that long spot over trees, over a hill. It was maybe a little too cloudy that day. It was a little bit past sunset and we had an AFF student and they ended up in a tree. Or we had 12 different landing directions when the winds dropped down and nobody seemed to know what was going on. I know these are embarrassing and we kind of try to keep them on a lowdown. We don't want to talk about them in the future. But if you can figure out how to reconstruct how it happened and share that information, maybe we can save lives in the future. I see some comments. So wrapping up, I know all drop zones have lawyers and I understand and cannot blame them for being cautious and advising their drop zones to stay silent and not proactively submit information like this. I understand that. I am not a lawyer. That's their job. But my reaction to that and the advice I've gotten around that is I'm just going to keep pounding the message, because eventually, over enough years, we will eventually figure out that staying secret is not helpful. It does not serve us well. Let's all be safe, and I'm going to copy and paste the link to the anonymous report system onto the chat line here. So thank you very much for your time, and let's have a safe year.
Thanks, Jim. All right. So that was Jim Reese. Can everyone hear me again? Yes, awesome. So I'm happy that worked. I was a little nervous about that, but it worked pretty well. So moving on from there, I was going to talk about the fatality summary as well, but since Jim already talked about it a little bit, I'm going to move kind of quickly through some of these incidents. As Jim mentioned, we had 15 fatalities this year. This is a breakdown by experience. So most of them, almost all of them, were jumpers who with more than 500 jumps. So technically experienced jumpers. As we can see, 2 first jumps, 1 between 50 and 200 jumps, and then 2 between 200 and 500 jumps. So we're going to break those down a little bit, but I'm not going to harp on it too much since Jim already talked about the takeaway messages there. So looking at for D-licensed fatalities, the 3 most fatal categories in the past 10 years are equipment problems, canopy collisions, and intentional low turns. This year we had 3 equipment problems, 0 canopy collisions, and 3 intentional low turns. So intentional low turns slightly above the average, and equipment problems certainly above the average. So this is a breakdown of the types of fatalities we had with collision with the aircraft, and 2 intentional low turns, 4 unintentional low turns, 3 equipment problems, 1 non-turn related landing problem, 2 incorrect emergency procedures, and 2 low cutaways in reserve deployments. So first off, with 3 equipment problems, they were all hard openings. The three individuals had 49 years of experience, 24 years of experience, and 47 years of experience. So they were very, very, very experienced skydivers, and a hard opening did them in. And the opening was so hard, in one case, it actually broke the reserve closing loop because the opening was so violent. So take care when you pack. Something that's often overlooked is the condition of your rubber bands. Are your rubber bands tightly holding all those lines together? If you have a loose rubber band, don't use it, replace it. Rubber bands are cheap. And also a big thing about hard openings is making sure your slider placement is correct. But beyond that, hard openings, prevent them. They can be fatal. 1 collision with the aircraft. What this happened was there was a premature deployment of a tandem inside a Cessna 182. Got sucked out of the plane. The tandem instructor died from impacting the tail, and the student was fine. So situational awareness. Make sure that you're cognizant of all your handles inside the plane. Don't let it get snagged on anything. We have 2 low cutaway and reserve deployments. So I have the notes here. 1 person had 25 years of experience, had a break fire, and then cut away at 1,000 feet. Worked to get stable because they didn't have an RSL. The work to get stable, how to get belly to earth, and then deployed the reserve too low to the ground for inflation. The other person had over 1,200 jumps. It was a planned canopy formation jump. They exited at 13,000 feet, took a few second delay, pulled. The canopy was then spinning, and then for whatever reason, it was cut away below 1,000 feet, and the reserve did not have time to inflate. So 2 instances where the cutaway was just far, far too late for no apparent reason. And one sort of line that I think is interesting about cutting away low, because the USPA has been pushing out recently. Don't delay cutaway. I'm sure you've seen ads in Parachutists or on Facebook or whatnot. So to date, how many people have died because they decided to cut away too late? And this year we had 2, and there's been many in the past. And then to date, how many people have died because they decided to cut away too early? And that answer is 0. So there's no need to wait. I mean, I've been guilty of fighting something for a little too long, but there's no reason. Just cut away, pay the $60 to get a reserve repack, and move on with your day. It's not that big of a deal. It happens. We have a question: would you chop if you needed to at 1K with an RSL? Yeah, that's not recommended, Scott. So we had 2 incorrect emergency procedures. What happened here? One was a first jump student as a static line, and the student had a brake fire and did not initiate emergency procedures. They were on radio, and they simply didn't do it. The other, the jumper had over 8 years in the sport, 250 jumps. It was also a brake fire. Canopy was spinning, and did not pull the cutaway handle far enough. And so one riser released, then the reserve handle was pulled. The reserve entangled with the main, and then the reserve then inflated, but by then the main and reserve were fighting each other, and then the jumper impacted. So again, incorrect emergency procedures for both those. One case, it was never done, and the second one, we had an incomplete release of the risers. So realistic and frequent emergency procedure practice on the ground will help jumpers perform their procedures correctly during an actual malfunction. We have realistic and frequent practice. Do we have problems going on here? We have a poll for how not to die. I have no idea what that is. Yeah, if you can. That's strange. The next one, we had 7 landing problems. That almost was half of the fatalities. We had 2 intentional low turns, 4 unintentional, and 1 non-turn related. So the 1 non-turn related landing problem was the jumper had 2 years experience, 150 jumps. She flew her downwind leg of her canopy pattern too far beyond the main landing area. The ground winds were strong. She turned to face the landing area, but she had no forward drive because the winds were so strong. And she remained facing into the wind and landed on a highway where she was killed by passing traffic. So, yeah, crazy. So that is, we talked about, you have a plan for your pattern, but you need to have a plan B for your pattern. What if you're stuck in an interesting situation where you need to go further downwind? You need to have a plan B in that situation. We had 2 intentional low turns. One was a cross-brace canopy at a higher elevation than the jumper is used to. Therefore, the canopy is going to dive further and faster. And the second one was a jumper with 4 years of experience, 850 jumps. She was doing a 90-degree turn, and she just simply did it too low to the ground. She was used to doing a left turn, and she had to do a right turn, and maybe that had something to do with it. But low turns, and we need to not do that. Practice high performance turns in a safe way, and get coaching. We had 4 unintentional low turns. One jumper did a low 180-degree turn to get landing in the correct direction, did it too low. A tandem instructor was flying downwind at 100 feet, attempted to do a 180 land into the wind. The student died, and the instructor broke multiple bones. The jumper had 500 jumps, did a 270, was planing out on his rear risers at an appropriate altitude, and one hand slipped off the riser, which caused the canopy to dive aggressively into the ground. And then a jumper had 180 jumps plus a whole bunch of military jumps. It was the first jump of a canopy course on a canopy he probably shouldn't have been on, and whether it was some sort of panicked low turn. He was going to do a 90 on final, but he ended up doing a 180. Speculation of why he did that, but again, unintentional low turn. So again, having your situational awareness in a low altitude plan B is important. So that is the fatality summary. The fatality index 0.45 per 100,000 jumps, or 1 fatality in about 220,000 jumps. So pretty low fatality index. Is there any questions before we move on? Great way to prevent panic turns is to get some crew experience. People panic because they've never seen a canopy up close. Yep, that's great information for sure. There's a reason not to have handles on rear risers in that scenario. Handles. Yeah, manufacturers don't do that for a reason, and I'm going to keep it there. Any other questions about what we just talked about so far? I'll wait a few moments for you guys to type if you need to, or however long there's a delay. Okay, I'm going to take it there's no questions. So moving on. Injury procedures on the drop zone. If you're injured, no one wants to see this above them. We don't need a dozen people running out into the field. How's that fatality index compared to other years? Similar. We don't need that out in the field. So please, if there's not a specific reason for you to be out there, don't go out there. Let the SNTA, Rob, and Dimes coordinate what's going on. Manifest calls 911. Manifest is trained to call 911. They know how to direct people which entrance to come into. Because are we going to enter in the field? Are we going to enter in the clubhouse side? It matters. So relay, we'll get the information to relay to Manifest, and they will make the call. Do not fuel speculation to your friends or to your friends that might not be on the drop zone. Give the jumper the respect that he or she deserves, and just let the appropriate actions occur. And use your common sense. So if you are landing out with someone and they get hurt, by all means, please call for help if you have your phone. Don't not call because I said Manifest needs to call only. If someone lands off, you can, by all means, please call the drop zone. You should all have the phone number if you take your phone with you. That's what I'm going to say about injury procedures. I know the winter time gets a little weird sometimes, but we have way more people out there than we need to. So give the jumper the respect they deserve and get out of there. Raj, call the paramedic on time. Yeah, that's a good one. Sorry, buddy. Hope you're doing okay. Aircraft safety. We're getting a shorty caravan. Woohoo! Cheers. I can't see any of you or hear any of you. All right, hope you're cheering. It's going to hold 12 jumpers. We have similar considerations to the pack in terms of loading and exiting. It's certainly not an otter. You can't pile up 20 people in the door and be okay because it can't hold 20 people. So there you go. So that's the aircraft we're getting. When it comes, we can talk about seatbelts and bars and all that good stuff. But that's the plane we're going to have. If Bob is flying, be prepared for a really fast airspeed. And so hold on tight. Love you, Bob. Is the door distance to the tail the same as a full-size Caravan? Yes, I believe so, Scott. So wingsuit considerations are the same as a Caravan. So seatbelts and helmets to 2,000 feet. Seatbelts and helmets to 2,000 feet. And helmets, Dave. Make sure we have our seatbelts on, not in your chest straps. I don't know. I'm assuming they're going to be single-point seatbelts. If you can, put them through the junction of your main lift web and your leg straps. Don't just put it through a leg strap, and don't put it through your chest strap. Chest straps are not meant to take any loads. Also, when you get on the plane, make sure you're ready to exit the plane. So before you step foot in that aircraft when you're loading, you should be ready to exit at any moment. Leg straps are tightened. All your stuff's tightened. You are ready to exit and ready to go. Do not board the aircraft with loose stuff. Nice boring takeoffs, hopefully. Red light, open the door. Green light, look out, and you are free to jump. You're cleared by the pilot to jump. There could be scenarios where you're not okay to jump, like clouds, aircraft flying without ABSB or whatever. In an emergency, listen to the pilot. I hope you guys saw the video that Bob posted on Experience CPI. I was hoping to post a link here, but now the link is private, so no one can actually watch it. So maybe if it surfaces again, I'll share it. But it was a compilation of a whole bunch of aircraft emergencies that were pretty damn scary. Aircraft emergencies are something to always think about and consider. And I have was posing a question: what if you're at 1,500 feet in the aircraft in an aircraft emergency and the pilot's screaming, "Get out"? Something to consider, because we always thought about, hey, we're not going to exit the plane below a certain altitude, but the pilot's screaming, "Get out," probably should consider something else. You have a parachute. All I'm going to say. Group separation, we'll talk about that later. Al King. Chris Graves, you get out. That's what I'm getting at. Recent USPA changes. These are from the previous board of director meetings, the most recent one and the time before. So these are not all of the changes. These are the ones I kind of wanted to talk about, things to highlight. The D license requirement has changed. Previously, it had to do 2 night jumps. There was some controversy on those night jumps. So now you have more options instead of just night jumps. There's an accuracy component. There's a canopy formation component. You can do a water jump. And you have a number of certain formation skydives. You can find all that information, I hope, in the sim. Yeah. So before I keep going, we have a thing about aircraft. Bob asked, don't open the door after takeoff until above 2,000 feet, until everyone has seatbelt off and TAMs are hooked up. Yes, great point. Yeah, seatbelt and helmets on to 2,000 feet, door closed up to 2,000 feet. Do we have a question? No. Scooter with the water jump. Yeah, buddy. Also, the pro rating requirements have changed. It's completely revamped. I could talk about it all day. But the area has changed, and there's also wing loading components. So if you're over a certain wing loading, you have to meet even more requirements. I think this is a great idea because some people have pro ratings that shouldn't have pro ratings, myself not included. All right, I'll ignore that. Also, all prorating, all jumps for prorating have to be recorded on video, either outside or first-person point of view. And thirdly, skydiving is now prohibited within 8 hours of consuming alcohol. It was not worded that way before. So if you want to be on first load at 8 a.m., you have to stop drinking by midnight. That is a hard rule. 8 hours bottle to throttle, just like pilots. Question, do people have to recertify or are they grandfathered into the pro rating? They have to recertify. You don't have to get a whole new pro rating, but there are recertification requirements for that pro rating. You can look that up. I don't know what they're off the top of my head. If you have a wing loading over 1.5, I believe, there are additional requirements to recertify. So that could be a consideration for current pro rating holders. Any other questions? And then, yeah, I had to put this in because haha. So your Coronas have to stop 8 hours before jumping. All right. Moving along. Canopy reminders. Oh, when I was thinking about what to talk about at Safety Day, there are many, many, many things I wanted to talk about. And there are many things about Canopy I want to talk about because Canopy is where we have most of the problem. Bottle to toggles. Jeff Harrigan coming in strong. Canopy reminders. There's a lot of things that I could harp on with Canopy. I picked out 4 or 5. The ground is hard and unforgiving. Please, people, remember the ground is hard. Even when there's snow. I know the snow is soft, but there's not going to be any more snow for the rest of the year. Dave said it's snowing on Monday. Great. The ground's hard. It's unforgiving. Please remember that in everything that we do. A safe landing is a requirement on every skydive. It's a requirement. You need to put in the time and resources into learning how to fly your canopy and how to land your canopy safely. If that requires you to take a canopy course, if that requires you to go on a different canopy, if that requires you to travel to another drop zone for a canopy course, please do so. This is your these are your limbs. This is your life. Like, please take ownership for yourself. I have this low to the ground. We need symmetric inputs. So if you're low to the ground and you need to do a turn to avoid something, you need to do something out of the ordinary. It's tough to talk about every possible scenario, but use symmetric inputs is my conclusion. If you need to make a turn, make a nice, gentle, flat turn with symmetric inputs. By when you symmetric inputs, like put the same input in on the left and the right. That will save you. That will save you. If you need to land in half brakes without a flare, if you need to land from half brakes and flare from 3/4 brakes maybe, that is going to be much safer than you burying a toggle and just turning into the ground and hoping for the best. So symmetric inputs are very, very crucial when you're low to the ground. Oh God, I'm not going to read that out loud. And PLF, I can't stress enough. Like, if you need to, just PLF. Parachute landing fall. You learned it in your first jump course, and you probably never use it again because it wasn't the cool thing to do. But if you're going to land and you're like, oh man, this is going to hurt, just PLF, tuck and roll. Tucking and rolling and brushing the dirt off is way better than a broken ankle or a tibia or a femur or whatever. Please, just PLF. If you can't run it out, and it's going to be hard, PLF. If you have a lot of vertical descent when you're coming to the ground, PLF. Simple. Just PLF. I will congratulate you for PLFing any day versus trying to stand up a landing and that you fail at, because feet and knees together are going to save you. It saved me. I know it. And Chris will talk a little bit more about after this about canopy flight and a little bit more specifics on canopy. Practice flat turns and brake turns regularly, regardless of experience. They save lives. Yeah, that's a great point. Whenever I get a new canopy, especially, I will up high. I'm just in deep brakes and practicing where that stall point is, how to maneuver in deep brakes, how to do flat turns, flaring from half brakes, flaring from 3/4 brakes. What does it feel like? And I do that frequently on skydives where, I haven't worked these skills in a while. I'm gonna be in brakes as my whole descent to figure out what that slow flight feels like, because you gotta put it in the backyard. You're gonna be thankful that you know how to do all those maneuvers. And I know that practicing those has certainly saved me from hairy situations. So practicing flat turns and brake turns, great advice. DIO, DI0, I don't know who you are. Canopy choices is another thing I wanted to talk about. Could talk about this for a while. But what do I have here? Aggressive downside. So across the skydiving industry, and this is also the case at CPI, especially with some of the newer jumpers, there's an aggressive trend to downsize. My question is why? What's the rush to downsize? Is it because you see the cool kids on the drop zone and they have their Valkyries, and you want to go from your 190 pilot and get there as fast as possible? Like, that jumper on that Valkyrie has put in years and years and thousands of jumps to get there. You gotta respect it and put in the time. And so when people say, hey, am I ready to downsize? these are a few of the questions that I ask and I think about before ever recommending downsizing and thinking about downsizing for myself. Can I confidently, italicize, can I confidently land in a tiny backyard? Can I do that same thing downwind? If your answer is anything but absolutely, you should be downsizing. I think it's really simple. Even if you're on the tiniest little canopy, you should be able to confidently put yourself wherever you need to be at any given moment. So if the answer is you can't confidently end in a tiny backyard 10 times out of 10 because your life depends on it, don't downsize. Do I know what happens when I do something to my canopy? Is it when I add a certain combination of brakes and risers, harness and brakes, harness and front riser, half brakes and harness, whatever it might be? Do I know what happens, and do I know what it feels like? Because if you have to do something weird down low, you need to know how your canopy is going to respond and how you can respond to that canopy to make sure you have a safe landing, because a safe landing is a requirement on every skydive. And also, what do I want to accomplish by downsizing? Far too often people are like, oh, I have 500 jumps, it's time for me to downsize. And I'm like, okay, but why do you want to downsize? What is it that excites you, or what do you want to accomplish? What do you want to get out of that downsize? So if that is because you want to pursue high performance turns, if you want to pursue, you want to squeeze more performance out of your parachute, you want to, I don't know. What do you want to accomplish by downsizing? You got to ask yourself that. What are your goals with canopy? If your goal is just to get to the ground safely every single time, there's no need to downsize. There are people on this drop zone that have a lot of jumps and have no intention of downsizing. Like, I'm going to call it Rob Zabo out there because I know Rob Zabo is watching. And Rob jumps to 150, and he has a lot of experience. And he knows that, like, he has no reason to go faster. He just wants to have a safe, enjoyable canopy flight, and for him, that's a 150. We have any questions? It's only time to downsize when you cannot scare the poop out of yourself in your current canopy. Good. Take a Flight 1 canopy course. Take a canopy course at all. Like, lots of, there's a lot of coaches, put this in air quotes, coaches that decide to teach you canopy nowadays. There are many, many options for taking a canopy course. There's no excuse not to take a canopy course. Yeah, they might be a little expensive up front, but you're learning skills that are literally going to save your life one day. So canopy courses are essential. I remember I took a canopy course when I had 50 jumps, and I still think about that canopy course to this day, and that was almost 8 years ago now. Oh, geez, Rich. All right, any other questions here? Easiest way to downsize our trips, Burger King. Great. Was that last year, Doug? And finally, is this the right canopy for me? I'm going to call out Ronnie. I don't know if Ronnie's listening right now. I wish he was in the room because I can be like pointing at people and making fun of people and heckling people, but I can't see them, so it doesn't matter. But Ronnie was on his Sabre 2, didn't like the Sabre 2, sent it back to PD. Something was wrong with it, and PD said, you get a new canopy. And Ronnie took her time to decide which canopy was right for her. She demoed, I believe, a Sabre 2, a Spectre, and a Storm, and maybe something else in there. And she jumped a whole bunch of canopies, and she decided that the Spectre, I believe, the Spectre was the canopy for you. And you've determined that that was the right canopy for you, for your jumper, depending on what you want to get out of your canopy, what you want to accomplish. Do you want to prioritize good openings, soft openings? Do you want to prioritize responsiveness, general responsiveness? You want to prioritize a strong flare for landing? It all depends on the canopy that you jump. I also think canopy choice is also a little bit of personality. If you are a very reserved person and you're very reserved, a certain canopy might be better for you than another canopy. That's basically all I'm going to say about that. So is this the right canopy for me? If not, buy another canopy. Like, is pounding in on this current canopy and scaring yourself every time you jump worth it? No. Like, skydiving's supposed to be fun. If you're scared about pulling every time, get a different canopy, period. That's what I did. I bought a canopy. I put 10 jumps on it. I hated everything about it. Got a new canopy. There's no excuse. Get a new canopy. Questions. Scott, you're incorrect. Al King, how about when to upsize? Yeah, I think if you're considering upsizing, you have better thought than most people. Yeah, upsizing is important, especially when people get older or they gain weight or they take long time off of the sport. I was just talking with Justin Boudreau yesterday. I think he might be watching. And he has a Valkyrie 84. And he said that when he comes back to skydiving, he's not going to feel comfortable on that canopy, so he's actually going to upsize. So Justin Boudreau, a lot of experience, and wants to upsize. So his son outswoops you already, Dave says. Golf clap to those people considering upsizing, because it's probably not an easy decision to make. You probably have to suck up your pride a little bit maybe, but upsizing can be the very safe thing to do. There are many resources available. Access Flight School, Brian Germain, I spelled his name wrong. The French Federation of Skydiving, the British Parachute Association, and the USPA all have excellent resources on canopy. They all differ slightly in what their recommendations are, but they're all saying the same thing: be on a canopy that's safe for your wing loading and experience. So there's a chart right here, and you might have to squint to see this a little bit. But this is Brian Germain's wing loading canopy size chart. And I'll give you time to full screen if you need to. This is what he recommends. This is by no means the answer to everything. This is just looking at jump numbers and exit weight. There are far more considerations than just this chart. But if you look at the chart, I weigh about 165 pounds. My exit weight is about 195, call it. So we'll look at the column that says 198. I think we can see my cursor here. We have 198. And when I have 200 jumps, it says I should be on a 190. And when I have 300 jumps, I should be on a 170. If you want to look at a lower wing loading, maybe you're a lighter person, your exit weight is closer to 175. When you have 100 jumps, it recommends a 190, and 200 jumps, a 170, 300 jumps, a 150. By no means I'm saying you need to downsize this rapidly, but this is sort of a general figure to get a comparison. So if you're out there and you have 60 jumps and your exit weight is 190 and you are on a 150, something's wrong. Something's really wrong here. I'm happy to talk to anybody about your current canopy size. If you come talk to me, I promise I will not scold you, because you are reaching out and looking for help and advice, and I'm happy to help you. I will share this presentation after the fact. This chart goes on for, I think, up to 500 jumps. The Access Flight School goes up to like 2,000 jumps. It's really interesting. Gray numbers in parentheses are like the Jeff Harrigan asks, what do the parentheses mean? That's sort of the absolute bare minimum that you should be on, depending on other factors. The bold number is sort of the average size canopy that most people are on in this experience. Who is snoring in here? Oh, there's a dog in here snoring. It's like, this is exciting stuff. All right. Not reserves. So cameras. I want to talk quickly about cameras. Having a GoPro is the cool thing to do nowadays to record your skydive that nobody cares about. I said it. So my question to a lot of people is, why do you want a camera? Ask yourself, why do I want a camera? Is it to film, your jump that is not great, what's the point of taking your camera? I'm gonna be blunt about this. Just because you have 200 jumps does not mean you're ready for a camera. I hear people all the time, oh, I'm hitting 200 jumps next week and I'm buying a GoPro today. It's gonna be on my helmet at 201. What? How does 200 jumps equal I'm gonna put a camera in my head? So ask yourself, am I ready for a camera? And I'll get to a little bit more specifics in a second, but are you ready for a camera, and why do I want a camera? Like, most of the time I jump, when I'm not filming a tandem, I don't have a camera in my head because I have no reason to film this mess of a belly jump or a mess of a free fly jump. I'm never gonna look at that footage again, never. Any questions? I only trust Gerstein's opinions on cameras. Gerstein's washed up. For the gram, Scott. Yeah, dude, like that's, I know you're joking, but like a lot of people are like, oh my God, I need this camera in my head because I live in California and I have black skinny ripped jeans and I have a white t-shirt and I have a GoPro in my head because I have a smoked visor and a tinted visor. Those are what kooks do. Cameras are scary. GoPro, worst thing for competition training, yes. All right, Jason has a question. So you can learn from your jump in canopy flight. Potentially, but you can't see yourself on your jump when you're filming. So like, how can you critique your body position or what you're doing? Like, oh, I didn't get there because I was too far away, but great. Like, how's the GoPro going to help you? Canopy flight, maybe. You can see sort of where you turned, but I think a fly sight is a better tool if you want to improve your canopy flight. Because looking at a GoPro, it's very difficult to tell what altitude you are because of the wide angle, difficult to tell where you are over, difficult to tell how close you are to other canopies. So if you really want to improve canopy flight, get a fly sight. Who is Charlie Tango? I don't know. Wow, Will Savage. All right, so talk a few things about GoPros here. If anybody jumps with a camera like this on their helmet, shame on you. Shame on you. So the reason being is that giant thumb screw is an additional snag hazard. Look at that orange line. Oh, gold medalist Casey, welcome, welcome. So this line can easily get snagged on your camera, and especially think about the other side. If it gets pinched between the bottom of that camera and that thumb screw, it's never coming out. Just 2 weekends ago, I think, Dave posted pictures of, I think it was Ethan Beatty with lines all tangled up in his camera on the ground. That's just after landing. So something to consider. So alternatives to this stupid thumb screw. It's a metric. I'm not going to list off the thing, but it's a hex head cap screw. They're 35 cents at a hardware store. You put a little Allen wrench in there, and boom, that's your new GoPro. I have one on my GoPro. Yes, you're not going to erase the snag hazard that's in the left image, but you don't have that thumb screw sticking out ready to grab onto something else. So 35 cents at a hardware store. There's really no excuse for that one. And finally, another option to replace that is a shear clamp. Replaces that thumb screw. A little bit less of a snag hazard. This one's sweet because you can adjust your angle on the fly and move your camera. And those are $20 on that website. There. This is all backwards. Any questions? All right, moving on. A few more things about cameras. Alternatives to replacing this screw and getting a little more smart about this stupid hook on your head. A cookie roller mount is an option. They're $100. Goes underneath your GoPro and prevents the lines from getting underneath the GoPro. Awesome, awesome alternative. There's also many 3D printed options nowadays. They're on Shooting Star. They're on Facebook. These are a few Facebook people, users, shops that make all sorts of really, really, really slick camera mounts of all different price points and all different things you want to accomplish. So a lot of options out there now with 3D printers getting more and more popular. So with this, if you have some sort of roller mount, that line can't get snagged underneath. So I want to point out this mount in the lower left that I just brought up. So that is your standard sticky mount with your standard thumb screw, but there is a that plastic piece we see is a piece that mounts between the sticky mount and the GoPro. And so actually you can slide that off the sticky mount, and that whole unit is one piece. And that piece is like, they're like $20 or $25. And that just fills in that gap below the camera, and you still have your sticky mount. You have all that. You don't have to drill in your helmet or get a new mount or anything like that. It just pops on, super easy. There's a million camera options, and people are like, oh, what about this mount? What about that mount? Yes, 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 of course. But most people have GoPros. Most people have setups like this, and I want to talk about those. I can talk about cameras all day, but we're going to move on. So this is a scary sight. This circulated on Facebook this past year. There's also a video. So what is going on here is that GoPro is still recording, getting the shot, but it's tangled up in the reserve lines in the reserve slider. If you look on the right, that's his reserve canopy, not looking good with his main still attached above. So this guy lived incredibly. The video is scary. You can find it online. Just do a little Google search. But I don't know the full details behind all this. It was on a demo, and essentially the GoPro got caught in the lines and caused a huge, huge problem. So when you think the GoPro is harmless, think again. It is an added risk that you are taking. Oh, geez. All right, be a hero, not a zero, whatever. And thirdly, like look at this. Like this is an AFF instructor with a GoPro on their forehead as like a hook, and it catches the bridle on the student deployment. If you're an AFF instructor that has a GoPro like this, and this is a possibility, you're wrong. I'm gonna move on. All right, this is a fan favorite. Take a look. Oh no. Ground's getting pretty big. Good thing that the GoPro's on, getting the shot of their mediocre skydive that's not going to be mediocre anymore. They got the dock. Oh. Yeah, let's check that altimeter. Yep, it's 0. I'm on the ground. All right, so hopefully we've all seen that before. Pretty scary. So cameras are distraction. I can't say for certain that a camera was a factor on this jump, but I can certainly tell you both those guys had 2 GoPros. They did not have 200 jumps. I can tell you that with certainty. Was the GoPro a factor in their AAD fires? Maybe. I gotta get the shot for this one dock at 900 feet. C, you can, no, Jason, wrong. So cameras are a distraction, whether you like it or not. They're a big, big distraction, especially when you have a still camera on your head. Good luck. I forget how to fly sometimes. I have a still camera on my head. Emergency procedures. We'll come back to the AED in a second, but emergency procedures right now. When was the last time you pulled both of your own handles? Not like a crappy hanging harness that has Velcro from the 60s. You should be pulling your handles at every single reserve repack. Put your rig on. Even better, hang in it from your risers. We have a setup in the AFF shed where you can hook up to your own canopy, pull your own handles, and then give it to your rigger. Say, hey, pack it back up for me. One hand or two hands on the cutaway. All those old school people are saying, oh, one hand till I die. But if you click on this link, you can't click on it because it's not going to work, but I'll share this later. It's on the USPA. It actually talks about very experienced jumpers trying to cut away with one hand, and they're on small canopies that are spinning so fast they actually needed two hands to pull that cutaway because the force was so strong, the G-forces. So one hand or two hands when you cut away. Something to consider. There are resources out there. This USPA article is a great place to start. What is your decision altitude? So I asked somebody the question, and I said, what's your decision altitude? Because they had line twists or something. And they're like, my decision altitude is 2,500 feet. And I was like, awesome. So what altitude were you out of your line twists? Oh, about 2,100. Something's not adding up there. I thought your decision altitude was 2,500. Why didn't you cut away at 2,500 if you didn't have a landable canopy? So he was like, oh, I guess my decision altitude isn't 2,500. Maybe it's something lower. So something to consider. What is that altitude that you are cutting away? What is it? Is it 2,500? That's what students are. Is it 2,000? USPA recommends a minimum of 1,800 for D license holders. What's your decision altitude? And think about how long your canopy takes to open, and factor that into your decision altitude. If your decision altitude is 2,000 feet, and your canopy takes 900 feet to open, if you're pulling below 2,900 feet, you're busting your decision altitude every single time. So think about your pull altitudes, think about your decision altitudes, think about your canopy choices when it comes time to decision altitudes. If you want to talk, I'm happy to talk. There's a lot of information in the sim. The sim is a great resource for everything we're discussing today. You must act. So if something goes wrong in your emergency procedures, do something. Don't just say, oh, it's out of my hands. I'm going to see what happens. No. Save your life. Do something. Work the problem. Don't ever give up. So there are many videos out there you can see on Friday Freak Out or whatever where there was some crazy problem and the person remained calm, worked the problem, didn't give up, and they lived. If something crazy happened, like in the first video we saw where they used the hook knife to cut away the main canopy, if that jumper just panicked and said, all right, hands out of the toggles, let's see what happens, who knows if they would have survived. So don't give up, work the problem, act, do something. Good point, Tim Miller, about decision altitudes. For me, I thought this was assumed, but it's certainly not assumed. Don't wait till your decision altitude for a cutaway. If there's a malfunction, cut it away. There's no need to wait. Altitude is your friend in those situations. Thanks, Tim. Don't delay cutaway. Again, there's no harm in cutting away that canopy too soon versus too late because the ground is hard and unforgiving. Difference between decision altitude and hard deck. It's kind of pushing the scope of our conversation right now. But I think what we're trying to get at too is if you have a canopy out, how low are you going to cut that away versus if you find yourself in free fall at a certain altitude, what are you going to do? Is it main or is it reserve? But I don't want to get too caught up with that. Those of us who have woefully low jump numbers are still pulling at 4.5K. Yeah, it's on the high side. We'll talk about it offline. AAD activation altitudes. Who knows what their Cypress fires at? Go. Can't see my hand. Go. Actually, it's going to be here. Type it in. What does your Cypress fire at? What does it fire at? We got one answer. 900 feet. Okay. Me. What does that mean? Come on, let's see it. Let's see it. 750 plus or minus 100, 1100, 1050. All right, stock Cypress, no offset. What does it fire at? 1050, 900. All right, these people come out of the woodworks. What's up, Ostap? 1250. Sweet. I'm talking about a stock Cypress, no offset. All right, I like all the guesses. A little interaction here. That was fun. Depends on body position. Boom. We're talking about it. A lot sooner when I hop and pop. All right, so these figures are straight from the manuals. I went to the manuals last night because I made this presentation last night at 10 o'clock, and I pulled these from their manuals. In quotes, both Cypress, we're talking about Cypress and Vigil here. If you have a Mars, you can look it up yourself. They say, quote, plan to have a fully open main 1,000 feet above your activation altitude. They both agree on that one. So Cypress says, in quotes, approximately 750 feet. What does Vigil say? Quote, when it measures 1,100 feet, average altitude is between 840 to 1,100 feet. Different story from Cypress and Vigil. Slightly different altitudes, but Vigil provides a range. Cypress says approx 750. What is going on here? The devices do the exact same thing. They measure altitude, they measure speed, and they make a calculation based on those two. And when the firing parameters are met, it fires the cutter. And hopefully your reserve loop is through that cutter. So this diagram is ripped out of the Vigil manual. On the left, if you're back to Earth, you don't have a burble. And so your Vigil, your Cypress will measure sort of your true altitude. If you're at 800 feet, it measures 800 feet. If you're belly to Earth, you have that burble behind you, and that unit will measure higher than you actually are. So Vigil says this burble can account for up to 260 feet. So Vigils are set for 840 feet. If you're back to Earth, it's firing 840 feet. If you're belly to Earth, it's firing at 1,100 feet. And depending on different orientations, head down, head up, if you're sniveling on your canopy, that burble can change. It can be sort of a dynamic situation. But 840 feet to 1,100 feet on average. Sometimes it's a little higher, sometimes a little lower. So that really means your Cypress is 750 to 1010, assuming the same margin of error, 260 feet, due to the burble. So stock settings on your Cypress, 750 on the low end to above a little over 1,000 feet. In your Vigil, 840 to 1,100 feet. So there was a recent discussion on our Facebook page about should I change my activation altitude. All these AEDs nowadays, you can adjust the activation altitude up, not down. So you can say increments of usually 100 feet. So example, Cypress, you can go to 850, 950, 1050. But remember, add that 260 feet for the upper end too. So if you raise your altitude, say for nice round numbers here, say you raise it to 1,000 feet, that means it can fire as high as 1,300 feet. So just keep that in mind when you're thinking about if I should raise it. Are you an AFF instructor that maybe you pulled low because you're chasing a student or something got a little hairy at pull time and your canopy takes 1,000 feet to open? Maybe we're kind of getting close to that activation altitude. So make those considerations when thinking about that. This link here is a good one, but please talk to somebody if you're considering raising your activation altitude. One thing to consider at CPI is, I'm pointing over there because that's where the hill is relative to me. The house on the hill, that's 400 feet or so. I mean, I'm sure Bob will chime in and say it's 426 or something. If you're over that hill and your AED fires at 750 feet, you're only 300 feet off the tech, and that could be a problem. So something to consider. Anything that I missed here in this chat? Cool. That's what I want to talk about, AED activation altitudes. Finally, my last slide before I get going, and we have Dave, Chris, and Dimes come up to talk for a few minutes. I want to talk about awareness. And what does awareness mean? Josh with a question. Maybe. You got that's, I'm not going to worry about that. You can look at the visual manual. Oh, before I move on to awareness, before I forget, sorry. I've had people say, oh, I asked a question to a rigger about my AED and they told me this, and that information was wrong. Or I say, oh, how long is my PD reserve good for? Someone says 20 years. Not so. What's my minimum opening altitude? And someone says it's 1,200 feet. Wrong. So if you don't know the answer, help the person look it up. How do we find those resources? How do I go in the sim? How do I look in the manufacturer's website? How do I look at the manufacturer's, the visual document or the Cypress document? So if you don't know for 100% certain, look it up with them. Give them the correct answers before you tell them something wrong. Because you shouldn't ever have to give out bad advice, especially if it's something to do with a Cypress or a life-saving piece of equipment. You're like, oh no, it's fine, you can continue doing that. Or no, it has an error code. Oh no, don't worry about it. Look in the manual and figure out what that code is. So I challenge everybody, if they're giving out advice, if you don't know, crack open the sim and look at it. If someone asks me, what's my altitude for this? What does it say in this? I'm going to the sim and I'm going to look at it because I don't want to be caught giving bad information out. Awareness. Awareness on skydives is it's something to think about. So I kind of ripped this off of Dan BC's Safety Day video he posted a few days ago. I'm heavily paraphrasing. So thinking about awareness, to be aware on a skydive, you must be calm. And if there's a lot of stuff going on and you're like, oh man, you're not calm. You don't have the awareness of what's going on. So talking about skydives you're not ready to go on. You might have the skills to go do a 20-way whatever, but you might not have the awareness to be on that skydive. You don't have the awareness to look at everybody, to be aware of what's going on when the dive flow doesn't go as planned like usual. How do I adjust? How do I make decisions? If you are aware, you can make the appropriate decision. If you're not aware, you can't make that decision. Think about break off. If you have the awareness for break off, where is everybody? You can make good decisions. So you might have the skills, but you don't have the awareness. So think about when you're doing your jump. I could go do a huge belly jump, but I'm not comfortable over like a 6-way free fly jump because I don't have the awareness of where everyone is, the speed, all that kind of stuff. If you're wingsuiting, you might not have the awareness to go do a 20-way. And if you think about it, when you're doing these new things, when you're doing learning how to skydive, free flying, wingsuiting, getting a rating, getting your coach rating, those first jumps, you are overwhelmed. You got so much stuff going on. You are not aware of absolutely anything. Think about that first coach jump that you did. And you have to look at the student, give them hand signals, and remember what happened. And altitude awareness. That is so much stuff. I guarantee you in those first jumps, you were not aware of what was going on. And so there's a reason that we have this progression so people can hold your hand through it to give you that awareness and your peace of mind that you need to excel. And on landing, you need the awareness. Don't get tunnel vision when you're about to land. So when you're on final, sometimes people will do weird things or cut somebody off. I'm like, hey, why'd you cut that canopy off? Oh, I didn't see him. Why not? Because I was focused on landing. You need to be able to be aware So you can be focused on landing and focus on other canopies and knowing where other canopies are at all times. If you can't do both of those at the same time, you're not on the right canopy. Upsize, get something different. You can see Dan BC's full thing at this link. And again, these slides will be up to share. Or just splitting into smaller groups for sure. If you're not aware on the 10-way, do 2 5-ways. All right. Here's a bunch of resources. Dave, you're going to be up in a minute. There's so many more resources than this. I'm going to, I don't know, with all this coronavirus, I might be locked in my house for quite some time. So I want to put together some resources where you guys can go learn about some stuff. These are just a few of them. Questions before I give the mic to Dave. Adding 2 new things in a jump really kills your awareness. Yes. New Friday Freakout just posted. Doug, want to play it? Absolutely not, Scott. Go away. Anything constructive out there? You have about 10 seconds before I get up. All right. Dave Gerstein. We're going to swap mics here, and he's going to talk about some exit separation.
Doug, you said we wouldn't be able to see them, but I see Philip naked. What's with that? I thought, how does this work? All right, moving on. Oh, why'd that get cut off? There might be a problem with my slides, Doug. Anyway, so I'm going to be talking exit separation. Can everyone hear me? Let me make sure. Look at the, okay. So we're going to be talking about complex maths and methods for achieving sufficient relative lateral positioning to minimize collision risk for individuals in a state of, I think it's something or other about free fall. Let's see how the slides are. Oh, I forgot. Now featuring 9% more animations if you've seen this before. So hopefully my stuff isn't cut off. We might have to change to the other presentation if it is. Okay. So there's a lot of myths surrounding exit separation, and that's what this presentation is going to go into. So some methods to calculate proper exit separation don't really work. I just want to point out, oh, this is not the latest one I sent you. This is not the fixed one. Can you get it quickly?
Yeah, I can stand by.
All right, let's take a 2-minute break. Doug will get the correct slides, and we'll be right back. All right, can you hear me now?
It's not back on.
Can you hear me? All right, we're good to go now.
Sorry.
So, uh-oh.
Just click that screen.
All right, sorry about the delay. So, this presentation requires complex math. Everyone check your email now. There'll be complimentary graphing calculator software. Thanks for sending that out, Doug. Just kidding. This presentation is to tune your BS meter and not to teach an exact method. Look at the animations. I don't know if that's playing for everyone. I hope that worked. Okay. So, separation between groups on exit provides separation between skydivers and different groups on opening. So we track to separate from the people in our own group. I'm not going to go over where these numbers came from, but we need at least 300 feet between opening canopies to avoid collisions. That's just a general number based on the speed of our canopies. So how much separation do we need on an exit? Well, there's some methods we can use to figure it out. Okay, so this is an old one. This one goes back many years, but I still hear it every now and then, so I want to cover it. Wait until the previous group is 45 degrees behind the plane. This one, I actually heard a really big organizer say this. Someone asked me at a 10-way going out, and someone said, hey, I'll be following your group out. How long should we wait? He said, oh, wait until the previous group is at a 45-degree angle. And that stuff really just bothers me. Does it work? No. It is not supported by physics, and it doesn't stand up to testing. Where does it fall? Off the scale. But it usually works. People have been using this for years. So what gives? What about wind? What about group size? So we all know, we've all heard this since we did AFF, that your exit separation depends on both the wind, what the ground speed of the plane is, we've all heard that, and the size of the group. None of that's taken into account. So, this just doesn't work. I was going to show a video that proves that it doesn't work, but I took that out of here because of this format. So let's move on. So the next one is stare at the previous group for unknown reasons and decide to climb out based on various random unscientific factors. This is a typical one, and I can't quite see the, can you get to the chat, Doug, where I can see the chat?
The chat's here. Oh,
Is that-
yep.
Sorry.
This is new to us.
Social distancing. Social distancing. Okay. All right. Anyway, so this is one you'll hear a lot of times. I'll say to someone, how do you know when to exit? They'll say, I just watched the group that left before me. So does this method work? No, of course it doesn't work. What are you looking for? How do you know you have enough separation? So the group before you, the way they look in relation to you, how far they look, is completely dependent on the type of jump they're doing. It'll look the same every single time, so it doesn't take wind into account. So we know that one doesn't work. Okay, so this is distance covered over the ground. Wait to exit until the plane has traveled some number of feet over the ground visually. How many feet? Well, that depends. So size matters, the group size. So hopefully this makes sense, because I'm going to have some graphics that are a little bit hard to follow, so I'm trying to show what they are here. If we know we need 300 feet of separation between two opening canopies, that means each person has to track 150 feet from each other. So that takes up 600 feet of total space, right? So that's what that looks like for a four-way. So if you think about it, I'll try to use my mouse here. The center is where the formation started, and the end of the arrows is where each person opens at. So these are 300-foot circles that provide adequate separation between all jumpers. The total size of this thing, 724 feet. An eight-way needs over 1,000 feet of space without getting into the math. Okay, so minimum spacing between groups, so that's two four-ways. One got out before the other. So if you think about this person right here and that person right there, they're tracking right toward each other. So if they are going to be 300 feet apart, they need to leave 724 feet between their two groups. Problem is, what if they track too far? Some people can track way more than 150 feet. So let's leave between two four-way groups at least 1,000 feet of spacing. So that's how we get our number. We need at least 1,000 feet of room between groups. Okay, so now we know how far we need. We need 1,000 feet. How can we measure it? Well, we have a great big ruler on the ground, right? Anyone know how long our runway is at CPI? I'm waiting.
There's about a 5-second delay right now.
I'm waiting.
Not long enough.
1,800 feet. So that's the right answer, 1,800 feet, which is almost exactly a third of a mile. So if you want to look down and figure out, how many miles away from the drop zone we are, you can just count how many runways are required to between where we are and the landing area. It's a really good ruler to use. Okay, so does this method work of measuring distance over the ground by looking at the ground and using a reference on the ground to measure how far we've gone? Yes, but where's it going to fall? It's in the green. It's true, but there's some problems. How good are you at judging exactly what's below? If you're looking down at a little bit of an angle, you may not realize it. And can you judge distances while climbing out? Because we don't wait until we're 1,000 feet after the previous group got out before we start climbing out. We're going to start climbing out early so that we exit 1,000 feet from the previous group. So it's kind of hard to do that while you're climbing out. And I know we never, ever, ever jump over clouds, but sometimes something on the ground might be obscured and it's hard to judge our distance. So it's just not very practical in real life. Also, what about weird winds? We'll talk about that on a slide coming up. Okay, the fourth method, wait a predetermined number of seconds between groups based on the plane's ground speed. We can all count. This is easy. Does this method work? Usually. So, yeah, this is correct. This is the way to do it, but there are some caveats that we'll go over. How much time do we have to wait? Well, it's the same idea as the distance covered over the ground. It's however long it takes the plane to go that amount of distance. So let's get into that. So we know we need 1,000 feet for four-way size groups. Easiest way to do this is to use a chart. We'll try to make sure this is posted in the plane this year. This gives 1,000 feet of separation based on the ground speed of the plane. So all you have to do is ask the pilot for the ground speed and check the chart for the number of seconds. We can add time for bigger groups because we already said an 8-way needs more room, or a 10-way is even more than that. And that this is 1,000 feet for a 4-way. If you're only doing a 2-way, maybe you could subtract a little bit of time. So either you get the ground speed from the pilot, or you can estimate it by looking at the winds aloft, which are posted on the screens outside of Manifest. The catch to this, though, is that it assumes the proper exit order and an upwind jump run. So just going by the chart isn't quite correct. Okay, so I just talked about exit order. Let's talk about exit order here. We order it by fall rate slow to fast. Why in the world do we do it? Why wouldn't we put the fastest people out first? It doesn't make any sense, does it? This is a really, really common question we get, and usually we get asked this at the boarding area when the plane is running, and we just don't have time to give a real explanation. So I want to do it right now. Why do we choose our exit order? It's all about the wind. Let's start exploring that by looking at some basics. So a little thought experiment here. We have 3 aircraft. One flies really fast, one flies at kind of a medium speed, and the other just goes wherever the wind pushes it. They're all aimed to the north, and they're going to fly for 1 hour with wind out of the west. And the question is, which one is going to drift the farthest to the east? And the thing is, a lot of people would say the balloon will drift the farthest to the east because it has the most surface area. But this is what it actually looks like. So they're all starting in the bottom left corner. They're all pointed to the north. Here's what happens in this really crude animation that hopefully is playing smoothly for you guys. And it'll just play over and over again. The whole point here is that the faster plane, yeah, it's going to go north the fastest, but the wind affects them all exactly the same. Everyone get that? Ah, funny. Okay, what does this have to do with skydiving? So we're just going to flip this over now. So now instead of looking at planes flying over the ground, we're looking at wind drift as we descend. So if a free flyer and a belly group exit at the exact same time, here's what it looks like. The wind is going to push them exactly the same. There's no difference. So it has nothing to do with body position as far as how much we drift in free fall. Okay, let's keep on going. So if we just continue that was a little snapshot, but if we keep going all the way to pull time, what happens? So the free flyer gets to pull time first. Let's call it 45 seconds for a free flyer and 60 seconds for a belly group. So you can see here, even though they drift at the exact same speed, the belly group went farther. They got more drift from the wind only because they were in the wind for a longer period of time. Just looking at the comments. Okay, so what that did is gave extra opening separation. So we just saw, if I play that again, they left the plane at the exact same time. And they still got some separation on opening. That extra separation is caused by the wind. Thanks, wind. So when groups fall at different speeds, they fall for different amounts of time. This provides extra separation thanks to the wind. Exit separation charts don't take this into account. So subtract the time when fall rates vary and the proper exit order is used, and add time when faster followers go first. And we're going to get into faster followers going first in a minute. Being careful with this subtracting time between exits, but we all know, that's what the charts are doing, basically. But again, that's when fall rates vary. You might be able to vary from the chart. Groups that fall at about the same speed don't get that benefit, but the wind still matters, right? So ground speed is still important when we're looking at exit separation, but you don't get that extra separation by having different fall rates. Okay, so let's talk about why we have the exit order. So it's a little bit hard to understand my stupid graphic here, but the plane is flying along in this chart from right to left, going on jump run, and the belly flyer is going to get out when the plane is here. The free flyer is going to get out when the plane is over there. So I'll play the animation here. Belly flyers got out, then after them the free flyer got out. So that's our normal exit order right there with slow to fast. And as you can see, they drifted apart. The belly flyers got extra separation from the free flyer because they had the proper exit order. So they got even more separation than they would have gotten. So let's put the free flyer out first now and look at that other scenario where the faster follower is going to go first. What you see there is they drifted toward each other. So whatever it said on the chart, when we look at the exit separation, was now defeated by the fact they got out in the wrong exit order, and they will get too close on opening. Bob said exit times should include climb out time. Right, this is time from exit to exit, not from exit to climb out. Okay, so the other thing that is a problem with this is unusual winds. So let's talk about downwind jump runs. So the ground speed is really high. When you look at the chart, the pilot might be saying the ground speed is 130 if we're doing a downwind jump run, and it's going to show a very, very small amount of time on the chart. Charts don't lie, they're made by scientists, so must be correct, right? Nope, that's BS. So we got to be really careful when we're not flying into the wind on jump run. So here's what that looks like. Now the plane is flying from left to right on the screen, and the belly flyer is going to get out first. So belly flyers get out, then the free flyer gets out. And what we can see here is they're drifting toward each other again. So that's why the exit separation charts don't work properly when we're doing a downwind jump run. So let's change that around and let's change up the exit order now. Let's put the free flyer out first because we're doing a downwind jump run. Free flyer gets out, then the belly flyers get out. And you can see here, they've drifted apart. So if we're going to do a downwind jump run, we have to change the exit order. And that gets really, really confusing. We're not used to it. Where do you put tandems and AFF and wingsuiters and all those other factors? So we really try to avoid downwind jump runs. If it's a crosswind jump run, which is pretty common just to get the openings to be in the spot where we want for the lower winds, you're basically just negating the effect of the wind. So downwind jump runs don't happen very often, but we do them. Don't follow the chart. The effect of the wind is reversed. It reduces separation. So we have to reverse the exit order or increase the time between groups. If we increase the time between groups, the problem is the jump run gets super, super long. Remember, the plane is cruising along at really high speed at that point. So we don't really want to increase time between groups because we'll get really, really far away. And the other problem is free flyers get more throw from the plane. And this is assuming they do like a perfect head-down exit and they're aligned perfectly into the wind. Then they will get a little bit more push out of the plane. They're not presenting as much drag right when they leave the plane. So that's actually hurting your separation if they're going second. So you could, in theory, the number I found online, I didn't do the math myself, is about 4 seconds of additional throw from the plane. So that would mean you could take 4 seconds off the exit separation if free flyers are going first. But I wouldn't count on it. What if they funnel their exit? What if they're not doing a perfect free fly exit? They're starting off on their backs or their bellies or in a sit or whatever it is. So you can't count on that additional throw. Okay. Another one is changing wind direction between opening and exit altitude. So if the winds at exit are in the opposite direction as they are at opening. It's not common, but it's not that rare. When you look at the winds aloft, every now and then we will see this situation happening. The charts don't work in this situation without modification. So let's see what that looks like. So the upper half of this chart, the wind is going one way, so we're doing jump run into the wind from right to left on your screen. But the winds at opening altitude are going to be going the opposite direction. So at first they start to drift apart, and then they start to drift toward each other. So what do we do about that? Well, we got to find a method that actually works all the time. When the winds are in the opposite direction at exit and opening altitudes, use the time from the chart as before, modify it. Subtract the opening altitude wind speed from the ground speed, then use the chart. So it's a little bit complicated to think about, but this is actually what's always correct. Ground speed never actually matters. What matters is the difference in the wind speed from exit to opening. We use ground speed as a easy way of estimating that because usually the winds at opening are pretty light and usually in the same direction. It's when they're drastically different that it becomes much more important to use a method like this. That's the precise method. The quick method, add extra time. So if you know that the winds are going to be opposite directions, we can add extra time to what the chart says. That's usually going to work. And in reality, the way we determine exit separation by time is we come up with a number to start with, we try it, we make sure we're getting enough separation. If we find that groups are opening a little close, we'll say add more time. And we'll talk about that at the boarding area or on the plane. Okay, anything to take up some time between groups is better than nothing. That's the key to this. That's why that 45-degree method works. That's why, when someone stares out and watches the group behind them and waits until, it looks good, that's why that works, because they're taking up time. Usually we can use the time between groups based on airspeed, or based on ground speed, sorry. That almost always works. And exit separation charts are great, but we have to consider how opening altitude, wind, group size, and jump run direction affect the time they recommend. So we can't blindly follow the charts. In other words, use your BS meter. So anytime you see that the winds are strange, anytime you see that things don't make sense, that jump run is weird, chances are we're going to have to add more time between groups. That's pretty much the key. Okay, in conclusion, there's more to exit order than fall rate that wasn't covered here, right? We go big to small, and part of that, big waves need longer to climb out, so they can start before the spot. Students in tandems pull higher and get back from farther. That's why they don't go in the normal exit order. Trackers and angle flyers, what are you people doing? Seriously, I've heard some of the weirdest stuff with the angle flyers. We had one group of angle flyers that insisted on getting out first and then insisted on 30 seconds of separation to the next group. Why? If you're going away from jump run, it won't matter. Get out wherever you want. This was only intended as a brief lesson on the basics. There's a lot more to consider about exit and opening separation, but you should be able to identify BS about exit separation. Any questions? All right, you want to read me some questions?
What if the light changes when you're outside?
Fuck you, Bob. Next question.
When you're getting out late, check the lights or listen for distance calls from the pilot. I guess angle fire is like first, last, wherever. You want to just say that?
Yeah, so the point about angle flyers is they should be turning away from jump run, right? They should be going perpendicular to jump run, getting away from everyone else. If they're moving across the sky, it shouldn't matter where they're getting out of the plane. A lot of times they like to get out first or they like to get out last. If there's two groups of people moving, it makes sense to have one of those groups get out first and the other get out last. But the whole point is you shouldn't be going up and down jump run with movement groups. So it really shouldn't matter where they get out of the plane. It might depend on where they want to open, things like that. There's a lot of factors to consider, but they should have a plan that accounts for all of those things. All right. Limit the number of jumpers. Yeah, we're going to limit the number of jumpers on the plane by the number of seats. That's okay. Yeah, hop and pop sometimes need to wait longer. They're opening right away. How long should a high pull wait after a wingsuit? Typically shouldn't matter. I mean, the wingsuit could have a premature opening right on exit, so you have to take that into account. But basically, other than being conscious of things like that, exit separation shouldn't really matter for something like that. All right, that's all I got.
Chris.
Thank you.
Doug messed up my presentation, everyone.
No, I'm trying to take care of this. Go. Turn it on and start talking.
All right, can everyone hear me? Can you believe they asked me to do a safety presentation, of all people? For those of you who know me anyway. So this is about canopy flight and safety. Hey, puppy. Oh, I'd like to add that that photo made it in. He does every year on safety day. Before you even get in the air, so are you jumping the right canopy for you? So obviously there's certain considerations that need to be thought of. You're not going to take a cross brace canopy and go wingsuiting. At least I hope you aren't. Some people might. That's your choice, but it's better that you don't. Subterminal only. I don't recommend taking a crew canopy and going and doing a four-way jump with it. Probably not the smartest idea. It's going to hurt. Age considerations along with experience and training. Doug kind of talked about that a little bit, as well as currency too. We don't want, somebody who's been out of the sport for 6 months that was flying something super small and twitchy to come back in and start jumping that again. I just saw an incident in Florida that didn't end very well. Is the equipment that you're jumping set up for what you're about to do? So risers, if you're doing any sort of normal jumping, you probably don't need a set of crew risers with all of that stuff taped onto it and those big goofy toggles. Also, along with those toggles, they should fit your hand. So for most cases, if you have larger hands, it's not going to be a huge issue. But for somebody with smaller hands, you don't want to be jumping a big loose toggle. A drop toggle is more than just a problem when it comes to landing, or more than just a problem besides landing. If you use toggles as your primary means of control for that canopy and you're trying to avoid a collision and you drop a toggle, well, it's not going to work, is it? Pilot chute. you may have a 40-inch base pilot chute. You probably shouldn't put it on your canopy. Also, if you're wingsuiting, you probably shouldn't be using a standard length pilot chute, F111, 26-inch, yada, 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 so on and so forth. You have better options available. And is your canopy in trim? So a lot of people still jump canopies that are lined with microline. In fact, most of them are. It goes out of trim, and though it may not look worn, over time, especially once you get north of that 500 jumps on the lines range, the outside lines start to shrink. It's going to deform the canopy, which will cause decreased performance as well as crappy openings. You really don't want either of those. And one more thing, should you even be jumping in the current conditions? So I see a lot of this during the winter, especially when we're inside and we're not necessarily outside feeling the conditions. Yeah, the wind meter's up on the board, but are you really looking at it? It gets super lax, and I saw a few scary things recently. I saw a kid with 27 jumps get out of a plane when there were 23-mile-an-hour gusts on the ground. After he assured me that it was okay, and I really suggested to him that he shouldn't. Yeah, use your head, guys. If somebody with a lot more experience than you, flying something that's much better in the wind than you are, is saying, no, I don't want to jump because the winds are scary, you probably shouldn't be either. And to make it worse, the person who I'm talking about decided that they thought that it would be okay to go on another jump after. And they were ready to go. They saw nothing wrong. Yeah, we don't care about free fall. I'm not going to talk much about that. Deployment. After you've tracked away, Dave just talked about that. Don't be that guy. Please don't be that guy. It's a scary thing seeing a pilot chute pop up in front of your face.
Respect your cameraman.
Yes, respect your cameraman, as Doug just said. He's one of those people. Wave off before pulling. Back to the pilot chute in front of the face thing, especially if you didn't track away. For whatever reason, it may be an emergency. You want to let people know that you're about to pull, and they can then move out of your way. Keep side-to-side input symmetrical while reaching for your main handle during your pitch. A non-heading opening is going to start with a non-heading deployment. Actually, it's even leg straps. They go hand in hand. If you're turning while you're pitching, chances are the canopy is going to be facing a different direction than you are when it finally comes off of your back. That could lead to potential problems like turning towards another jumper. And also, don't forget about your legs. They have just as much, if not more, input than your arms do. They're back there. They're still doing everything that they normally do. So be conscious of them as well. And the other thing, throw your pilot chute into clean air to the side of your body. Don't throw it in front of you. I know there's clean air out in front of you, but it's going to come back and slap you in the face. Don't throw it behind you. Remember your legs again. Those would love to get wrapped up with that. You don't want either of those. Opening. Just because you've thrown your pilot chute doesn't mean it's done and over with. Keep your head on a swivel both during and after your opening. So remember, people may not have tracked away or tracked as strongly as they should have. So you want to be watching out for other people while that canopy's opening. That doesn't mean staring up at your canopy, eyes locked on it, and that doesn't mean closing your eyes either. I don't know why you would close your eyes, but some people get scared. Keep your hips symmetrical to avoid harness input. People like to do all types of crazy dances after, they pitch and stuff's going on. Try not to. You're going to be giving a lot of harness input onto the canopy. Best thing to do is to think like a box and be relaxed but firm. Don't fight what's going on. don't fight what's going on, but also don't just turn into a rag doll either. And do not grab high up on your risers. This is a bad habit that a lot of people get into. I myself was one of them. It's a tough habit to break. You can cause yourself a lot more grief than you're helping, or do more than you're helping yourself. You can grab your 3 rings, you can grab your mud flaps, or you can grab very low on your risers. All of these things are going to help you to avoid giving input. Low on the risers is obviously the least desirable of those 3 because you can still give input, but it's still better than reaching up and grabbing your toggles or your front risers, or pinching them together is another one that people like to do. Not the best option. Canopy flight. Head on a swivel. Again, I'm going to be beating a dead horse with this one, guys. That means be aware. That doesn't mean not look where you're going because you're looking everywhere else. But be conscious of what's going on around you. Now you're open, be ready to avoid other jumpers after opening. Nobody is your friend. If it wasn't planned, don't get near them. If it was planned, there should have been some sort of briefing beforehand, and if you don't know what you're doing when it comes to flying relative with other jumpers, maybe you should go talk to somebody and get some coaching, take a crew course. Communication is key. Ask your significant other or your ex. Communicate visual contact with another jumper using leg kicks. Bicycle kicks are usually taught as a good way of communicating. It works. It could be a little difficult for them to see if you're facing head on. So I prefer jumping jack style or scissor kicks side to side. Also, it reduces the likelihood of you twisting in the harness. If you do it aggressively enough, you could put yourself in a lion twist, but I doubt people are going to be doing that. Canopy collisions can't happen if you aren't in the same place at the same altitude at the same time. If you take away one of those, it's not going to happen. And with that being said, it's pretty tough to have all 3 if it wasn't planned, but it can still happen. Canopy flight, there are 3 primary ways to make an input on a canopy. And there's one more too that I'll touch on briefly. First one, toggles. This is going to be the least efficient way to give an input. You're really deforming the canopy, you're pushing air out of it. It is, for the most part, the primary way of control that is taught. Just beware that any input doing this is going to put your canopy into a pretty aggressive flight cycle. If you use a brake turn, it's going to be less aggressive of a turn, still inefficient, but you're not going to lose as much altitude. But beware that once you let up on those toggles, the canopy is going to go through a flight cycle and start diving. Next, which is more efficient, are risers, front and rear. Front risers, the canopy is going to dive. You are going to deform it slightly, but you're not going to be depressurizing it. Rear risers are a flatter turn. You can also, if you need to make it really flat using rear risers, you can even use both rear risers to flatten it out, like if you were coming back from a long spot, and then give some input on whichever one you want to turn towards. And the most efficient way to turn the canopy is harness. This doesn't deform the canopy at all. It doesn't depressurize it at all. It leaves all the available power left in the canopy that can be available to use. Also, along with harness, there's one other way, which is body position. In many cases on a larger canopy, that's not going to have much of an effect, but as you get onto something smaller, changing your position in the harness can drive the canopy downward or upward, as well as change the glide angle of it. You need to know how your canopy responds to each. I touched on all of those, how they respond, but knowing your altitude loss is pretty important, especially if you are, low in your pattern or coming into a tight backyard somewhere, maybe a toggle turn isn't the best option for you at that time. Know the stall points of your canopy with both toggles and rear risers. This is especially important on landing. If you're stalling your canopy on landing, especially if you're not at ground level, all of a sudden at 5 feet off the ground, there's no more canopy over your head. I don't know if you've ever jumped off something 5 feet tall. It's not the funnest thing, especially with forward speed. And fly predictably from opening all the way until landing. If you're spiraling for no reason, or because you think it's fun, other jumpers aren't necessarily looking for that and going to be ready to react to that. The other thing is if you're on a larger canopy and you're now spiraling through all the people on smaller canopies and you're in front of them, they now have to get in front of you again, or they're going to be fighting to get in front of you in the pattern. It's not necessarily what they want to do, but it's just a complication of them being on something smaller and you being on something bigger. That doesn't mean you should downsize. Landing and flaring. No low turns. Don't do it. Like Doug said, the ground is hard and unforgiving. I know. Trust me, I know. Swimming lanes. So we, especially here at CPI, have a very small landing area relative to other drop zones. The swimming lanes analogy is especially important. If you're trying to land, a whole plane load of jumpers, which in this case that plane holds 12, right? Yes. 12 jumpers isn't a lot, but if we have another plane here and we're flying, more jumpers at once, it's not the... I'm getting there, Kat, don't worry. You want to stay away from each other. I may have had an oopsie this year because of that. Sorry, Philippe, you're probably not watching. Remember your landing priorities. See, Kat, I told you I was getting there. Number 1, level wing over your head. Flat level wing over your head. If your canopy is not level and over your head, then you are in a turn of some kind, or it has become depressurized for whatever reason. If you're turning when you hit the ground, there's a problem. You shouldn't be turning when you hit the ground. Area of clear of obstacles. This is one thing that CPI, we don't necessarily have a problem with, but we do have a north tree line. We have a west tree line, and on the east side, we have all the packing areas. Though our landing area is clear of obstacles, there are other obstacles around to be wary of. And flare to at least half brakes. Now, on that note, if you are in half brakes, you should be flaring from half brakes. Don't let up on toggles 50 feet off the ground because you were in half brakes trying to land somewhere tight. Your canopy is going to surge towards the ground and you're going to have a bad time. Single or two-stage flare. So the first one is one we're all taught as students. The single stage flare is a single smooth motion. It's designed to stop the vertical and horizontal motion in one step. This works well for larger canopies, 7 cells often, crew canopies. As you start flying, potentially something smaller, a 9-cell canopy, more high-performance elliptical, a 2-stage flare might be a better option. The first stage stops the vertical motion. The second stage slows the horizontal motion. Unless the winds are strong enough, it's not going to slow it completely. Or stop it completely. As you can see, Tom Brown on the right here, the nice 2-stage flare there, and he's happy. You know why? Because he remembered his landing priorities. And be prepared to PLF. It will save your life and your femurs I promise. I've witnessed. Downwind landings, my favorite. The flare is no different from landing into the wind. Nothing changes about this, really, other than that your ground speed will be higher than normal. Airspeed remains the same. And be prepared to slide rather than run it out. You will be happier that way. Your rig will be happier that way. Feet up in front of you and do it like the tandems do. So try not to dig your heels into the ground. Wait until you've stopped completely to stand up. You don't want to jam your foot into a hole or a root or something. It's going to hurt. You're going to walk away with a bummed ankle. Crosswind landings. This is a particular problem at CPI. Most of the time we have some sort of crosswind component because we really only land in 2 directions here. The landing direction will be intersecting the direction of the wind. Remember to stay in your lane. So back to the whole swimming lane things, you won't necessarily be facing the direction that you're flying in. All right, as you can see in the picture, if you can see it on your big, huge computer screen at home, canopy is not facing in the same direction that Josh is. And your flaring technique may change. If it's a slight crosswind, not so much, but a stronger crosswind, you may have to start asymmetrically to compensate for the direction of the wind. But remember that the flare always finishes symmetrically. That goes with any flare. Doesn't matter if it's crosswind or not. Landing considerations. Oh, look, the video blocked him. I tried, guys. I tried. Head on a swivel again. You will be flying relative to others in your pattern. Most people, I shouldn't say most people, but a lot of people have never taken a crew course before. So it's always nice to get, your first crew experience 1,000 feet off the ground. And most people don't think about it that way, but that's how it works. You want to fly distinct downwind, base, and final legs. Back to flying predictably, this is going to help others, recognize you. If you're, doing crazy stuff in the pattern, they're going to have to pay extra attention to you. And there may be something else going on as well that also requires their attention, but they can't because they're watching something stupid that you're doing. And you want to leave room for adjustment. So you could be short or you could be long. You're going to have to adjust for that. You can either bow it out and take a leg, a little wider if you need to, or if you're going to be short, you can cut the corner a little bit. Others may also be doing this, so be wary of them. Plan ahead. Before you even get in the air, you should be looking at the winds aloft. A lot of us forget to do that. But what we post may have changed. If you have an updated one, it would be a great use. Either Mark Schultz or Ryan Carlton are both good sources for winds aloft. And also, while you're up in the air, you can gauge the winds aloft during your holding period. So what was forecasted may not necessarily be true. You don't think that swoopers are hitting gates from 900 feet in the air because they just went off of the wind forecast, or that guy doing classic accuracy is landing on the tuffet just because he believed what people told him. He's up in the air, he or she is up in the air thinking about what's going on and how they need to adjust for it. Accuracy. It's not just for licenses and ratings, guys, or, for looking cool for Dave when you're kicking up peas in the pea pit and then coming back and shoveling all the pea gravel out of your shoe and throwing it on people because you're cooler than them. You may not be landing your canopy in the nice open landing area that you know so well. Back to the whole tight backyard scenario. It may not just be a tight backyard. It may be a tight backyard with trees in it. Definitely not ideal. And it could be extremely dangerous. Cars, we heard that story already. Trees, power lines, which in my opinion, and I think many of you agree, are probably the worst. In buildings. Buildings don't move. Final thoughts. Don't die. Remember, you're responsible for your own life. Most of the people watching this are from CPI, and you've probably heard the A license conversation that we give newly licensed jumpers. Listen to your coaches, both free fall coaches and canopy coaches. Canopy coaching may not necessarily be the cheapest thing, but it could save your life, and probably it will. And pay your beer fines, guys. No garbage beer. Seriously, like don't buy Natty Ice and put it in the fridge. Trust me, you just don't. Yeah, questions? Anybody? Oh wow. All right. Well, oh, hold on. Scott had one question about rear risers. So it does slightly vary on both your canopy and the wind conditions. My best advice to you would be, if you are in a headwind, rear risers will give you more penetration and glide. I'm cut off.
Cut off.
I'm cut off.
We have Dimes right now, and he's our last presenter of the day. Talk about gear. Thanks for all sticking around, and just give us a quick second.
All right, how's it going, everybody? Of course, I can't hear a damn thing, but I'm that familiar face. You guys see me around all the time, and touch a little bit about a little bit of our gear and safe gear, being that as we do have a lot of new jumpers, and the very first question that I'm getting before they're off student status is, where can I get a rig? Or should I get a new rig? Should I get a used rig? You know, how do I size it for myself? So, constant questions, being that, you know, each gear should be basically sized for you or and your body style. I always recommend used gear, which doesn't necessarily mean that you're going to get one perfectly fitted for you, but you want something that's comfortable and fits very, very well and adjusts to your body as you move. The issue with used gear is we'll come across, you know, how much has it been used? How, you know, looks aren't always everything. So, you know, we'll get like, well, this one's been jumped 400 times, this has been jumped 600 times. As you can see on the screen, you know, I have a few things up here, cutaway cables and housings and risers, and these are some of the first things that you're going to notice when you look at a gear. You see the coiled up cutaway cable, that's actually brand new. That's how your cables should look, nice and clean. You know, things should be routed properly as we do that gear check, and I do a standard gear check even when I'm just looking at somebody's gear for the first time. I don't know, a lot of you are probably on your phones, hard to see maybe, but to the right I have a cutaway cable. You'll see it's dirty, and that's a pretty standard picture that you're going to find, that I see when I pull out anybody's cutaway cable if I do a repack. Not abnormal at all. There's differences in how dirty. I've pulled some out that are absolutely disgusting. I wish I took pictures when I did pull them out so I'd have them. However, in taking care of our gear, you know, they become used, they become abused. The 3-ring systems you really want to pay attention to how clean these are. Every rigger, I know for myself, every time I do a repack on gear, I pull these cutaway cables out and I clean them. I get them as clean, almost brand new for when they go back in. It doesn't necessarily mean that inside the housing is perfectly clean. We do what we can with that. However, I have had some that were difficult to pull out. That being said, that they were piled up with a little bit of gunk over the years, you know, just over years of constant, you go up, you come down, you take your rig, you throw it on the mat, you pack it up, put it back on, you go back up. You know, I don't know how often we actually pay attention to what we're doing or where we're setting our rig down. The mats get dirty throughout the day, things like that. We don't necessarily always see what maybe goes into our housings. And the unfortunate part about that is it doesn't take much for something to go into our housings and possibly lock up our cutaway cable. So while I was putting this together, I happened to be searching around and I found hopefully this works. I found it's actually a base jump. And here we have somebody doing a base jump out in Moab, obviously. And he's actually going to perform a cutaway on a base rig. So you'll see, I think it's pretty cool. He does his count. This is all pre-planned. And, oh, here he is. His cutaway cable broke while some of it's still lodged inside. Can't get the cable out. You know, going back to what Doug was talking about with staying calm, he's actually fighting this every bit of the way, trying to pull out his cable. You'll be able to see it here. You see the cable broke. He pulled so hard. He's actually trying to pull that cable out from the 3-ring system because it's lodged inside the housing. He actually remained quite calm for somebody in this scenario. And he actually survived. Boom. He was absolutely just fine on that. Nothing happened to him. He's lucky. That comes into, you know, taking care, watching what we're doing, watching where we're packing our gear. All right, how do I get rid of this? Okay, here we go. So, like I said, just, you know, watching where we pack our gear, keeping our packing mats clean. I know some of the old timers used to pack out in the grass and set it down, do our old flat pack. I don't always recommend that. You know, it adds wear to places like the harness and stuff like that. We have here we have some pretty slick packing mats, but they don't cause that much damage. They still cause a little bit of damage. It is what it is. With the exception that maybe you just want to buy a packing mat and set your rig on that, strap it down, and then weight it and pack so that it's not rubbing around against the ground. Things like that.
We have one question. What do you clean your cutaway cables with?
Hmm?
What do you clean your cutaway cables with?
So cutaway cables, what I use is Pledge usually. Depends. Like I said, I've pulled some out really, really dirty, filthy, to the point where they're difficult to pull out. And what I use is a silicone-based oil, and that'll really take everything down. And then I'll use a Pledge to wax them and keep them nice and smooth.
No more questions.
All right. From here, we're going to move on to our brake lines. Very important, I think. I don't know where Bryce is right now. Hopefully she's watching. I used to bust her stones all the time because she would untwist her brake lines every jump. She was very anal about that. but it's not a bad habit to have. The brake lines have a tendency, you'll gain twists every jump, not even necessarily knowing what you're doing. It's very easily checked either during the packing process, or I've actually gotten into the habit of, while I'm flying my canopy, to take a look up and see if there's twists from the toggles all the way up. Sometimes I can correct them. Even on a tandem, I might take a quick look and see how twisted they are. If you can see these pictures, you'll see that they're in pretty bad shape. The one on the left, it's not just twisted, it's also, you see the fraying on the lines, and that being, we use our toggles to steer, they get extra damage. Should probably be a little bit, or actually those should be replaced, not just untwisted, those lower halves there. But on the right, you'll see how bad that twist there is actually what you would call as a tension knot. So many twists, and I have actually done this where there's been over 20 twists in a brake line. And unfortunately, you get, say, 20 twists on one side, and you go up, you open, and all of a sudden you're in a turn. You're not really, some of us don't necessarily think about it. We just compensate. But when you start getting down and the in canopy size, and you have twists like this, that turn can become a malfunction. A tension knot can be a malfunction. If it knots up, it can hang your slider up pretty high. And I actually have a video for this as well, where they had the line twists, and with that, so you'll see he's jumping a high performance canopy, and really twisted up on his right brake line, spun him right up. Just like that. You'll notice his slider didn't come down with that at all. He was, and it happened, I mean, that was rapid. That was really fast. But that's an effect of having that brake line twisted up or possibly knotted in a tension knot, holding that slider up. So, and all these things, they're all noticeable, while packing. I recommend it at least once a day, if not every pack job, to take a look at your brake lines, make sure that they're in good shape and untwisted. I mean, let's face it, end up with a malfunction over a twisted brake line, and you're going to have a cutaway, which ends your day. No fun. No fun at all. Let me come. What's he say there?
You just
Yeah.
set your brakes when you land.
Yeah. So, no other questions? All right. So, since we're into the cutaway side of that there, I wanted to talk about the other systems that we have. We've already talked about malfunctions and cutaways and our statistics, and I think Doug said that there was 2 contributed to gear, and one of those being too low. I hear a lot of people say, well, can I put a sky hook in this? That's a common question, and what we're talking about is a sky hook is actually a MARD system, which is main assisted reserve deployment. We also have just a plain RSL. The MARD system operates from the RSL. They're both attached to the same thing. The main assisted reserve deployment, that MARD system, there's many different types, and what that does is, in a standard reserve deployment, we pull our reserve handle and it fires our reserve pilot chute out the back, and that pulls out bridle and pulls our reserve out of the container. Well, an RSL will essentially do the same thing. And so it takes a little bit of time, usually roughly about 2 seconds, for you to get a full line stretch off of a reserve deployment. And when we switch over and we put these MARD systems in our gear, what we're doing is we create that main and a cutaway scenario to act as a large pilot chute for that reserve. And what they do, it literally pulls that reserve out. It's attached to the bridle at about 2/3 from the reserve bag, and so it cuts away quite a bit of time. All right. That being said, it actually cuts your line stretch from 2 seconds to about 0.6. You'll have the main or the reserve out of the bag and at line stretch in about just over half a second, which is considerable, which for that person that has a cutaway at 1,000 feet is huge. It's a huge time saver and altitude saver. The difference between being able to actually do any kind of checks and pull your brakes to doing a full control check and being prepared to land after a low cutaway at about 1,000 feet. So, like I said, MARD is what they are. The Skyhook is just one type. So you see, I just brought this up. There's a bunch of different types out there. The most that we're going to come across is the Skyhook, which was developed by UPT now, Relative Workshop. They put them in their vector containers, tandem containers. All their equipment has the ability to use a Skyhook, which is a proven system. Years ago, we actually had them out to give a demonstration, which was pretty incredible demonstration actually to watch out here. It was pretty cool. That same Skyhook is also used by Aerodyne and Sunpath. Other manufacturers have their systems. The trap system made by Mirage has actually no extra hardware in it. That is the only one that doesn't have any actual hardware, hooks, pins, anything like that. Rigging Innovations came up with theirs, which is a Mojo. That is also a pin. The Ace by Peregrine and the Boost from Wings. So Sam just asked, are there risks to having MARD systems versus not having them? We haven't seen necessarily any type of downfall that would persuade me to not having any type of MARD system. It is literally shortened time on any kind of malfunctions, and it, like I said, literally pulls that thing right out, pulls the reserve pilot chute away, gets that away from you as well. Not really any downside to that. To fail or function properly. And Scott asked if there's what will cause a Skyhook to fail or function properly. It has to be hooked up properly. Actually, yes. As long as these are packed in accordance with the manufacturers, they will always function properly. They've been testing all scenarios of malfunctions. I have not seen one fail yet. So, and then, who was that? Oh, John Spear, yeah, that's right, John. Vortex does also use the Skyhook. Sorry about that. All right. So, I just threw up a couple pictures. One of these is a it's just to demonstrate the difference in the RSL deployment after from a malfunction to a MARD deployment from a malfunction. The one on the left was here at CPI a number of years ago. The person had an issue and they got rid of their main. It was a student, and you can kind of see throughout the pictures, this is Dave's pictures, hell of a job actually, from cutaway to full flight on a reserve, and you can kind of gauge, you see the distance if you just with the person to line stretch, and so there, you know, they had quite a bit of time in there. Where to the picture on the right, you'll see that reserve, the main isn't very far, and that reserve is already out of the container, and the main is only maybe 30 to 40 feet away from the jumper. So, Sam asked the question, is there a MARD for Infinities? Yes, Infinity does have their own MARD. I'd love to put a name on it, but I haven't heard one yet. He just calls it a MARD. So I got some videos for this as well. This first video is actually a RSL deployment. So you can see from the time that they cut away to the time that they got line stretch on their reserve was a few seconds, and works great. You know, the main still pulls that reserve, but it just pulls the pin. The second one is a MARD system. See, that just progresses very rapidly. Just that fast. So, significant difference in time. You know, that was on a wingsuit, spinning so fast it puts you right into them twists on your what's that? I have Jan asked about with a horseshoe MAL. I have seen a video and with the horseshoe MAL, and it did deploy the reserve, pulled it out just as fast as it would with any type of separation of the main. So, what else we got? Probably shooting. John says the pilot chute isn't even open yet on that, and he's right. Because the main actually overpowers that reserve pilot chute. It happens that much faster. So, any other questions with this? Oh, Scott asks, any way to prevent twists while transferring over to the reserve? Unfortunately, I think that if you are in a spin, chances are it's just going to happen. Difference is the type of parachute. You know, your reserve is not necessarily just going to spin up easily.
Line twist on a reserve is better than no reserve at all.
Correct. It's line twist on a reserve is better than no reserve at all. So, you see, I just switched over to a container slide. Yeah, got nice, beautiful vector, all packed really nice, and you know, because part of this is just us. You know, we walk around, drop zone. You know, we see each other with our gear on. We're getting ready to get on a plane. All sorts of different stuff. So we have this nice vector all packed up nice to the left, and then we have this one over here to the right. We got material hanging out. We have the risers not even stowed. All sorts of crazy things going on here. You know, hopefully somebody would say something to this person if you see him walking over to the plane with a rig like that. Okay, Al said crew, very small canopies have downside with MARDs. It's still, with MARDs inside, on a crew canopy, everything's still detachable. You still have the shackle on the shoulder that'll allow you to disconnect that shackle if you're doing crew. So you don't necessarily have to have the MARD engaged if you're doing crew. Take that right out of the scenario, just like you would with an RSL, or you know, it would be your choice to disconnect that RSL so that your MARD is no longer in play. So again, we got all sorts of material hanging out here. One might think that that's somebody's doing crew. You'll see a crew canopy almost kind of looks similar to this. But if this is what you see, you know, go up and ask the person, talk to them. You know, it doesn't look normal, right? You know, that's not what we were taught from day one. We had gear that's you know, well put together. You know, you may see fabric hanging out like this, and maybe the person thinks that they're just fine, but they have a main that's too big for that container. You know, go up and ask them, hey, what's going on? Is that supposed to be like that? You know, a lot of times we're out here as skydivers, and well, we just want to throw a little bit of a larger main in our container. We're going to do this different jump this time, so I'll put a bigger main in, and then it doesn't quite close correctly. You know, that being said, and actually being guilty of that myself, switching over to crew, you know, all sorts of material packed into that container, and I got out to do that crew jump, and I never changed my closing loop, and I had a container lock. You know, something I should have known. Too much pull force or we can go the other direction with never change the loop, and we downsize our main, and now it's too loose, which becomes that hazard in the plane where, you know, we start rustling around, we bump our container, our main container opens. Now we got a main out inside the plane. Not a good scenario. You know, Not good scenario at all to have. So, if we're on the ground and you're walking around, you see something that doesn't look right, walk up and ask the person. If they don't really have a good, or they don't have a good explanation, or you don't feel comfortable, go ask a rigger. Ask a more experienced, an instructor, somebody that maybe knows more than you do. Say, is that right? Should that be like that? We self-police ourselves. Look out for one another. So, that being said, I got to switch this over somehow, just to take a look at a few things, a few of the basics here. I think I could set it on the back of the chair. All right, here we go. So I just grabbed a student rig. We can take a look at a few things. One of the, say we're out in the field, somebody asks us to do our checks, okay? It helps to know what we're looking at. We always do checks of 3, gear checks of 3, correct? So we have 3 straps, 2 leg straps, chest strap, right? Do we know how it's supposed to be routed? We don't need, I've seen it, somebody walking up to the boarding area and their chest strap is just flipped over. Not even through. They put it through, they put the keeper on it, and they think they're good, and that's not a good scenario right there. All right, that can still has the opportunity to fall out. Not necessarily going to hold you in. Okay, properly routed, your chest strap goes through the shackle and then back through the shackle like this, so that's what's going to hold you in. That's the mechanical advantage that holds you into the container. And your leg straps are the same way. So when every time I check leg straps, I check for proper routing of the webbing. Make sure that you're not going to come out. But you have the 3 straps routed properly. Okay, we have our 3 ring devices. So moving up from the straps, we come up to the 3 rings. Make sure those are routed properly, and not just the rings, but I take them out and I flip them underneath so that I can see that the cutaway cable is routed through the loop, which is through the amp fitting, and the excess is tucked up into the sleeve on the riser. We got a bunch of questions? No? Okay. I don't know, can't see a thing over there, so. Make sure things are neat and orderly. Make sure the RSL lanyard isn't just hanging out, all over the place like this, which could be a snag hazard. And, as we've talked about, that RSL, as long as it's connected, it has the opportunity to pull that reserve. I have seen saw a video where a jumper was climbing out on the step of a Cessna 182, hooked his RSL on the door on his way out, and deployed his reserve right into the tail of the plane. Luckily nobody got hurt. Everything cleared the tail, but just simple things like that, it becomes a snag hazard. So make sure 3 rings are routed properly. Make sure everything is in its place. Minimize our snag hazards. So we got 3 straps, 3 rings, and 3 handles. Okay? So 3 handles, always starting. When I do my personal handle checks, I start with my main. I do them in the order that I'm going to use them. So I reach down, I touch my main at the bottom of the container, make sure that all of my material, everything is tucked into that BOC. Nothing's hanging out. Again, not another snag hazard. We have all the new types of free fly handles, stuff like that. Again, personal choice. When I check that handle, I make sure that the bridle isn't just hanging out. I've seen this plenty of times where there's just have that little bit hanging out in the corner. Again, that's another snag hazard. You keep going, it pulls that out. It's going to pull the pin on that main container. So we want to make sure everything's tucked up real nice where it should be, out of the way, unable to snag. Check the pin, make sure the pin is in, and, well, depending on how it's said, some people like the smiley face, but to make sure it's seated properly, it's not through the grommet or through the bridle. And for those with collapsible pilot chutes, make sure you see color in the window to make sure that pilot chute is cocked. Uh-oh, hold up, stuck. There we go. So, put that in there. Make sure your cutaway cables, or cutaway handle and cables, seated in its pocket, Velcroed in, everything nice and secure. It's not going to just fall out. And same thing for the reserve. If a person's asking you to do that gear check, sometimes it is imperative. It's a good idea to maybe check and make sure that there's movement of that cable. I don't know if you can actually see it moving, but make sure that that cable moves through the housing so that you have freedom of movement and you can pull your reserve. Okay. And last but not least, on a gear check, some people, depending on the rig, you can see the AAD. Sometimes it's under the reserve flap, sometimes it's on the back. At the very least, if a person comes to me and they already got their rig on and I can't see their AAD, I ask them, hey, you got an AAD in this? They say yes. Is it on? If it's not a big deal. Pull the rig down, give it a check, make sure it's on, make sure there's no error code. Okay. Doug talked a little bit about that. Turn them on. We get them on, make sure they're armed, and they're saying what they're supposed to say. And if you have the offsets in there, it'll say right on the screen that you have an offset set and how much that offset is. And that holds true for all of them. The Mars, the AirTechs, and the Vigils. So, that being said, anybody have any questions? I don't. No. I think that's it, and that's pretty much all I got. So, thanks for coming, and we'll see you guys in a couple weeks. If I can get this off.
All right, thanks for participating in our little experiment. Seemed like it worked. And that's it for everyone. This is being recorded. It will be posted. The PowerPoints will be posted with all these resources. And bow. See you later.